Thank you very much for that very kind introduction. Number one, I don't manage 400 billion. I just manage under $5 billion a year, which some consider somewhat challenging. Is it okay if I speak from the podium? It's such a small group that lends itself easily to be a cozy conversation. First, thank you very much for the introduction. Thank you for the opportunity to chat with you today. It's great to see great leaders and great friends here today. It's great to see colleagues, also educators with the Miami-Dade County Public Schools. But it's great to see great citizens that come together as part of a great organization. I have to disclose up front that I am an honorary Rotarian, Coral Gables, and just 2 weeks ago I was in my home nation in Portugal, in Lisbon, and I know that you probably know that the Rotary International conference or convention took place there, and it was very, very tough not to be on the street in Lisbon where you didn't see Rotarians. Easy to spot because they were about twice as tall as the average Portuguese, mainly the American Rotarians. But it was a great feel in the city, and the hotel that I stayed in, it was basically filled with American Rotarians. And it was interesting, American and Indian Rotarians. Those were the contingents there. Let me try to spend maybe a few minutes sort of detailing the evolution of the public school system, going back to 5 years ago and where we stand today, and then hopefully touch a little bit on the hopes and opportunities, challenges also ahead, but ultimately where I believe we ought to be within not the next 5 years, but within the next couple of years. I think it would be fair to say that just a few short years ago, as I was being appointed superintendent, the district was facing at least 3 levels of bankruptcy. A financial bankruptcy, and that was not unique to Miami-Dade. Many governmental institutions and private institutions were facing and dealing with the woes of the worst economic recession that our nation had seen in over 64 years. But I have to admit that there were some technical human errors that had been made in this school system that needed to be addressed that were unfortunately compounded by the economic conditions. We were also facing a degree of academic bankruptcy, and that's my connotation for a system that by and large ignored certain segments of the community, allowed for graduation rates in the urban core schools, high schools, to be as low as 40% in some cases, meaning 6 out of every 10 kids did not graduate. The shame of our community was that all of those kids were poor, all of those kids were either black or brown, and a fair percentage of those kids were speakers of languages other than English. Any system that allows for that, any system that somehow aims for the middle or the top at the expense of the bottom is facing what I believe is a degree of academic bankruptcy. And then the last level of bankruptcy is one that actually allows the first two, which is an ethical and, if not moral, bankruptcy. Public or private systems that allow for conditions like that, financial management, or a disconnected element between the core function of the organization and the outcomes you're getting in terms of the academic bankruptcy that I described, cannot be an ethically bound or driven system. And as a God-fearing man, I elevate it not only from an ethical perspective, but also a moral one. So the past 4 years have been as much about creating innovation, listening carefully to the demands of a community, of clients of public educational services. This has been about righting the ship and ensuring that we emerged out of this economic recession not only better than most institutions of like size, smaller or bigger, but actually poised to prepare our students for challenges the likes of which I believe no generation before them has faced. Because no generation of Americans before the generation that we are grooming in schools today had to face not only national competition in terms of educational opportunities and job placement, but also international competition, and not only international competition from the known entities that have been always economic competitors to the United States of America. But now these interesting international competitors of late that just 10 years ago we would not imagine that they would be competing for the same jobs, for the same dollar investment, for the same financial investment par with the United States of America. Nations like India and now Brazil and even Eastern Bloc, former Eastern Bloc countries. And why should that matter to us, to you, Rotarians, to you as parents, as residents, as tax-paying members of our community? Failing to recognize what the new challenge ahead is basically succumbing to the avalanche, to the tsunami that's heading our way. And make no mistake that nations, even nations that for years, for generations, for decades, we thought benefited from a lower quality of life than we do here in America, are poised to train much larger segments of their population with higher levels of education as a percentage of their total population than we are currently doing in America. When South Korea, on a per capita basis, has a much higher percentage of PhDs, engineers graduating every single year, when in China right now, and I'm not in any way proclaiming China as the model society, it is not. However, in China right now, from an economic and educational perspective, there are as many English-speaking students as the total population of the United States of America. And the rate at which they are graduating college, the rate at which they are acquiring high-level educational degrees, engineering degrees, mathematics, STEM-related science, technology, engineering, and mathematics degrees is staggering compared to that percentage of America. Equally impressive and of concern to us is the fact that in our country, a fair percentage of the students who are enrolled in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics are not our native-born children. They are imported children who are coming from the outside to seek opportunity here. Now, we've always been a nation of immigrants. This is not new. The new thing now is it's politically savvy once again and politically advantageous to some to denigrate the attributes of immigrants because it's a salacious thing and it gets votes for some. But what is new also is that for generations, foreign-born, foreign nationals used to come here, high talent, high achieving, used to come here from China, from India, from Brazil, from all over the world. But then, once they completed their degrees, we were able to keep them here. And that was our secret. We attracted the very best and most talented in the world, and then they stayed here. They made their lives here, and they made a huge contribution in terms of research, development, innovation in our country. More and more, these nations have woken up to the realization that they were losing their talent. And what is China doing these days? You probably know this. Rather than sending their kids to Harvard and MIT and Georgetown, they entered into agreements with those universities to bring the universities to their countries. Why? Same thing with India. You go to Bangalore today, and you will see the presence of some of the most renowned universities in India. Why? Because they do not want to shift their talent here, because they know that they would lose it. Equally important, a lot of the young men and women who come here for an education are now going back, because finally there is a middle class in some of these countries and a growing middle class, and there's growing opportunity. Why am I telling you this? Because the solution for our country must be an investment, a serious investment in our own people, in our own youth, ensuring that the quality of education, the levels of educational attainment that we provide them are better than anybody else's. This is not simply about outcompeting their international counterparts, it is about outpacing ourselves. I'm getting a little tired, by the way, about the rankings, comparing ourselves to everybody else, because not everything is the same, right? Living conditions, poverty, the way we treat students with disabilities, who gets tested in some of these countries, is not the same way as we do in America. We are a nation of law, a nation of opportunity, a nation of civil rights, a nation that provides all people, men and women, not the same across the globe, right? Those who are fully abled and those who are disabled with the same educational opportunity, the same seat at the table, the same opportunity in the classroom in the least restrictive possible environment. Make no mistake about it, as we talk about the incredible achievements of certain regions of China, that a female, rural, handicapped student has no chance in China. So as we talk about comparisons, we have to be careful about what we're comparing ourselves to, lest we somehow elevate the worth or the dignity of nations and systems that really don't deserve it. But that does not in any way, should not in any way make us forget that at stake right now in America is our quality of life, and our quality of life is tied to the quality and the strength of our economy, and the quality and strength of our economy is tied to the quality and relevance and rigor of our education at all levels. And as opposed to what some folks who do what I do say, that you have to save America's senior high schools, we have to graduate more kids. I agree with that. But how do you do that? By investing early on in early childhood education. You boost high school graduation by providing high quality educational programs and support to young people, particularly those who we know simply by zip code of birth will come into a pre-K or a kindergarten program or a first grade with an educational delta, an educational disadvantage, lacking readiness to learn on the first day. By how much? The equivalent of 2 to 3 years compared to children who were born and lived and were raised by people like you, who did not use the television as the babysitter. Children who were born into families that have plentiful, rich environments. People who have parents who talk to them and explain things to them. A huge percentage of kids in our community don't have that. Absolutely do not have that. Have anything but that. Have violence, have crime, have poverty, have challenge around them all the time. So by the time they start school, they come with about 2 to 3 years of difference in terms of school readiness compared to their counterparts. So that was something we needed to realize, and I hope you understand from my brief remarks thus far, that my game in this community has been one of fixing our schools, but never ever forgetting the role that our community has in this greater canvas called America. And that's changing very, very quickly. And a lot of people are painting on it all the time. And then not forgetting that we are but a pixel in a multi-pixel picture that reflects the total global community of today. And if we somehow make the mistake of simply paying attention to what's happening in our community, forgetting about the trends in our country, or somehow observe only the trends in our country, forgetting about the overarching principles that are driving the world today in this newly globalized economy that is information driven, then I can tell you we have lost our opportunity as a community. So, what does that mean specifically for Miami-Dade? For Miami-Dade, for me, it meant that number one, we had to provide a high-quality educational program for all students or all schools, regardless of zip code of birth. Secondly, we needed to demand high-quality and effective teaching and leadership. Next, we needed to stabilize and improve our financial condition, leveraging, as opposed to other municipal and county leaders. That was after the commissioner left. As opposed to what they did, which was they put up their hands in the air, and I observed this, and I actually laughed internally, and then I really felt sad. I says, my God, economic conditions are terrible, we can't do anything about it, and we just have to impose reductions across the board, like that's really scientific. Make everybody pay the same, regardless of core function contribution to the community, right? Prioritizing what's most important in the lives of people. Cuts across the board, all people, and that's the way we come out of the recession. I don't believe in that. What we did is we actually leveraged the chaotic conditions imposed on us by a very rough recession, and we made the recession our friend. And what I said is we're going to leverage and take advantage of this crisis. We're not going to let it go to waste. And in a highly unionized environment, and I'm not in any way criticizing unions, But, between the unions and the elected board, the road becomes very narrow in terms of what you can do as a leader. An economic recession gives you incredible leeway in terms of doing a whole lot. And we fully leverage the economic recession as an opportunity to let go of expenditures, of functions, of people, of services that had little connection to what happens legitimately in the classroom. And during that time, speaking about teacher effectiveness and leader effectiveness, I did not renew, even though we were the only school system in America not to fire a single teacher for economic reasons. I did not renew 6,000 teacher contracts for performance reasons. I think that's fair. If you're not teaching kids, if not just as a function of 1 year, but 2, 3, 4, 5 years in a row, test data and other data, objective and subjective, indicate that you're not being able to penetrate and teach kids, why should I keep you as a teacher? Mainly after I presented you with opportunities for professional and human growth, I invested resources to make you a better teacher, it's still not working. Why should I keep penalizing the child? There's got to be a fair balance between the needs of kids and the wants of the adults. And I think we struck it here. For leaders, since they are not unionized, the change has been even more dramatic. 64%, and I have a former principal and current principal here right now, they know 64% of all principals in Miami-Dade are no longer who they were looking at 4.5 years ago. Data-driven decision-making, clear emphasis on effectiveness, principals' ability not only to manage budgets and being good community leaders, but also being great instructional leaders. Understanding what the communities need, what the students need, providing those resources. Knowing a good teacher from a not-so-great effective teacher, and making the tough decisions to ensure that they only hire great teachers. 64%. On the financial side, I take pride in saying that the financial bankruptcy, we came out of it well before the recession had ended. We actually front-loaded the challenge. I actually made a decision to overshoot the budget reduction that I needed to make because I figured early on that economic conditions were actually going to get worse before they got better. So if I felt that to balance the budget, I needed to bring about a 20% reduction in any one area, I probably went after 23%. Because if I made that reduction mid-year this year, I would bank on an annualized revenue going to the following year, meaning I would have to do less reduction the following year. I did that for 2 consecutive years. And in the middle of the worst economic recession we had ever seen, when I became superintendent, we had but $4 million in reserves. We were able to stabilize the finances in our district. Amazingly, as our nation flirted with defaulting on its debt and so its credit rating reduced, we improved our credit rating in the middle of the recession. We increased reserves from a $4 million level, flirting with bankruptcy, to $100 million in the middle of the recession. Didn't fire a single teacher for economic reasons, protected all elective programs, including the arts, music, physical education programs. In terms of the academic performance, when I became superintendent, there were about 13 schools that were being shut down by the state for performance. The high schools in the urban core, none of these schools had a graduation rate higher than 50%. Some had graduation rates as low as 40%. We're talking about the Edison Senior High Schools, Northwestern, Jackson Senior, Booker T. Washington, Homestead Senior, Southridge, a little bit over 50%, not a whole lot. None of these schools were shut down for performance. We moved them all from F and D range to A, B, and C. In fact, for the second year in a row in Miami-Dade, we are celebrating the fact that we have eliminated F high schools. Better yet, we have eliminated D-rated high schools. The graduation rate, the average graduation rate in the urban core high schools is now higher or close to, in some instances, the state average for graduation, with schools like Northwestern and Edison and Jackson having graduation rates as high as 75%. So, where does that leave us? And I'll close here. Leave us, well, it left us with an opportunity, number one, to cash in on the success. And I think good leadership is not quiet, and humble leadership. Leadership in high need, high demand situations demands more, seeks additional opportunities. And you saw us, and some people thought that I was bringing about my own demise. Even some of my own board members said, "You must be crazy." As we were nearing the end of the recession, you saw that I felt it was time to go out there and ask for the support of the people of Miami-Dade. Look at the results. In the toughest of times, we made tough decisions, and look at the outcomes. In the toughest of times, we made tough decisions regarding people and leaders and teachers, and look at the academic results in our school system. In fact, putting us in a position last year where we won the Nobel Prize of Public Education in America, the Broad Prize, the highest award that any one urban district can get. So what's the next thing? Well, when 50% of our schools are 40 years old or older, 40% are 50 years old or older, decaying, crumbling facilities, a huge inequity between children who are born in one area versus others, some with brand new schools, some with very, very old schools, some with technology, some without. No leader seeing that challenge and recognizing the accumulation of results that we had gotten should move on without providing a solution. And for us, the solution was passing a Proposition 222, a $1.2 billion bond referendum to renovate, improve, and build new schools, and to bring about ubiquitous technology opportunity and access for all children in Miami-Dade. In 1 to 2 years, in terms of technology, we will revolutionize the way teaching takes place in Miami-Dade. You saw just last month, I brought another item to the board to guarantee individual student access to digital resources, all students in Miami-Dade, at the same time, well, in waves, but guaranteeing ubiquitous digital access. We need to recognize that the way we live today, the way we inform ourselves, is digitally driven. And I believe that in a hyper-connected society, the digitally disconnected stands at a clear economic, educational disadvantage, which if not addressed right now, will be pervasive through their lifetime. So, we are at the cusp of great things happening in our district, with a bond referendum passed, with a very solid 70% margin of support, with work beginning, as I promised, this summer, with an oversight advisory board constituted and having met already twice, with engineers and architects already in place, with board policy that guarantees local benefit in terms of workforce placement, local benefit in terms of local firms getting a first shot and first opportunity at this economic opportunity that will create 19,000 jobs over the next 5 to 6 years, with a promise that after we pass the bond, since we were able to lock in very attractive interest rates, and we were able to front load the investment, we are now shaving 2 years of the implementation of the bond, so it's not going to be 6 to 7 years, it's going to be 4 to 5 years, moving projects in faster. I do believe that we are poised not only to continue the good things we've done over the past 5 years, but actually to accelerate the delivery of opportunity for all.